Hey everyone, I'm Azalea. On Christmas Eve, my parents swung open the massive double doors of our estate in Hillsborough and tossed my only suitcase onto the frozen marble steps. My younger sister, Vivica, was standing right behind them, arms crossed, smirking like she had just hit the Powerball jackpot. "Let's see how you survive now, big sis," she sneered. I dragged that suitcase through a thick, freezing fog. No money, no car, nothing left to my name except the long cashmere coat keeping me alive. I collapsed onto a snow-dusted park bench just inside our gated community, shivering so hard my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. That was when she appeared, an elderly woman, barefoot, her skin turning an alarming shade of ashy purple, her silver hair whipped wild by the wind. She looked like the cold had already claimed her. Without a second thought, I stood up, took off my only warm coat, and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. She grabbed my freezing hands, looked me dead in the eye, and whispered, "Kindness like yours is rarer than flawless diamonds." Then she walked away, fading into the mist. Exactly 1 hour later, 19 black luxury SUVs pulled up in perfect silence, blocking the entire street. The same woman stepped out of the middle car. Same face. But now she was wearing a floor-length camel hair coat, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, and diamonds glistening on her wrist. She walked straight up to me, smiled, and said just one sentence. "I've been watching you long enough to know exactly who you really are. If you've ever been thrown away by the people who are supposed to love you the most, leave your state or city in the comments, just so I know I'm not alone. Trust me. Keep reading. What happens next will leave you breathless." That afternoon, I was still in shock from the termination email that had hit my inbox at 10 in the morning. Another round of restructuring at the San Francisco ad agency where I'd given 6 years of my life. I stuffed my desk plant into the passenger seat of my 12-year-old Honda Civic and steered it south on the Wantarab 1 toward Hillsborough, 32 miles, 47 minutes. If the traffic was kind, which it wasn't. I had already called Mama from the parking garage. "I just need to crash for a couple of weeks while I sort things out," I told her. She sounded distracted, said dinner was at 7, and hung up. When I walked through the double doors, the house looked like a spread in Ebony or Architectural Digest. A 15-foot noble fir dominated the 2-story foyer. White orchids were everywhere. Waiters in tuxedos were setting the dining table for 20. My father, Langston, was uncorking a bottle of Dom Perignon 2005 like it was just a regular Tuesday. My mother, Ophelia, was fastening a new strand of South Sea pearls that definitely wasn't there last month. And Vivica, my 27-year-old sister, was twirling in a backless red silk gown, flashing a 6-carat, radiant-cut diamond on her left hand, acting like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Darius, my ex of 4 years, stood behind her with his arm wrapped tight around her waist. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and tried to force a smile. "Hey, y'all. Rough day at work." That was all I could manage. Vivica spun around, eyes wide with fake concern. "Oh my God, again?" She gasped loud enough for the catering staff to hear. "Third job in 4 years, right?" She turned to Mama. "Remember when she got fired from that startup in Soma for not being a culture fit?" Mama's lips thinned into a tight line. Dad didn't even look up from his champagne. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "It was a reduction in force, Vivica. They let the whole creative team go." Vivica waved her new ring in my direction. "Darius just closed his Series A funding, $28 million, pre-money valuation. The investors love him." Darius gave me that same smug smirk he used when we broke up 2 years ago with the classic line, "It's not you, it's the timing." Dad finally set his glass down. "Azalea, we need to talk." He didn't motion for me to sit. He never did when it was bad news. He told me, point blank, that last month he had amended the family trust. Everything, $38 million in assets, was now solely in Vivica's name. Irrevocable. Signed, notarized, filed with the estate attorney in Palo Alto. He said I was 32, capable, and it was time I stood on my own 2 feet. Mama added, We can't keep funding a lifestyle that doesn't produce results, Azalea. As if my salary ever paid for her orchids or her Birkin bags. I stood there with my mouth open, trying to process that my own black parents, people who preached about building generational wealth, had just legally disinherited me while I was standing in their foyer. Vivica had her phone out, recording. "Yes, this is gold," she laughed. "The big sister comes crawling back broke on Christmas Eve. Say something for my followers." I looked at Dad. "Are you serious?" He met my eyes for the first time all night. Cold, final. "You have 20 minutes to pack what you need. Security will let you back in tomorrow. For the rest, you make an appointment." Mama didn't even look at me. She busied herself adjusting a gold ornament on the tree. I walked up the stairs on autopilot. The bedroom I'd had since I was 10 still had my high school swim team photos on the wall. I threw jeans, 2 sweaters, my laptop, and toiletries into my old Louis Vuitton duffel bag, the one Vivica hadn't stolen yet. Everything else, books, yearbooks, my framed diploma from Stanford, would have to wait. When I came back down, Vivica was live on Instagram, narrating like it was a wildlife documentary. "And here comes the prodigal daughter with one sad bag. Any bets on how long before she's sleeping in that Civic?" Dad opened the front door himself. The fog had thickened. I couldn't see the end of the driveway. The temperature was already dropping below freezing. I crossed the threshold. "Merry Christmas, Azalea!" Vivica shouted, sweet as poison. "Don't freeze!" The door shut with a soft, expensive click. The alarm chirped twice as it armed. And that was it. In less than 30 minutes, I went from daughter to intruder in the only home I had ever known. I stood on the marble steps in the dark, a suitcase at my feet, wearing the only warm thing I had left, that long cashmere coat. The second that heavy door sealed behind me, everything went silent, except for the blood pounding in my ears. I stood in the empty street trying to breathe, but the air felt like knives. My mind kept replaying Dad's flat voice, 38 million gone with a signature, and Mama refusing to meet my eyes. I was 32, and in one conversation, I had become a stranger to the only family I had. I started walking because standing still felt worse. The suitcase wheels rattled over the perfect pavement, the only sound for miles. Every mansion I passed had warm, golden windows and laughter spilling out, Christmas trees glowing behind gated driveways. Each one reminded me I didn't belong anywhere anymore. My fingers were already numb. I kept thinking, this can't be real. Any minute Mama will open the door and call me back. She'll say it was just a cruel lesson. But the alarm stayed armed. No footsteps, nothing. I don't know how long I walked, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour, until I found myself in the small public garden next to the old Episcopal church. There was an iron bench under a street lamp that actually worked. I sat down hard, let go of the suitcase handle, and finally let the tears come. I cried for the little girl who used to hide under that 15-foot tree waiting for Santa. I cried for every birthday where Vivica got the bigger gift, and I was told to be grateful. I cried because I had always believed that if I just worked harder, achieved more, kept my hair straight and my grades up, they would finally see me. Turns out, none of that mattered. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Vivica. The tears froze on my cheeks. I hugged my knees to my chest and stared at the ground, trying to figure out how I was going to survive the night, let alone the rest of my life. That's when I heard the slow shuffle of bare feet on cement. I looked up and saw her. An elderly woman dragging herself toward the bench, silver hair matted and loose, thin shoulders hunched against the wind, skin so pale and ashy she looked translucent under the lamp. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly, and spoke in a voice raspy from the cold. "Young lady, do you know if any of the shelters still have space tonight? I've been walking all the way from Burlingame." "Everything is full." I wiped my face quickly. "I'm sorry, I don't have anywhere to go either." She studied me for a long moment, eyes piercing despite the exhaustion. Then she slumped onto the bench next to me, leaving a polite distance. We sat in silence while her breathing steadied. I noticed her feet were bare and turning that terrifying shade of purple-white that means the damage is deep. Something inside me cracked. Here was someone who had even less than I did tonight, and she was still polite enough to ask instead of demand. I felt ashamed of my own self-pity. Without saying a word, I stood up, took off the only thing stopping me from freezing, and draped it over her shoulders. She seemed startled, then closed her eyes as the warmth hit her. Her hands, thin, trembling, veins popping, reached up and clutched the fabric. She turned to me, tears shining in those pale eyes. "What is your name, child?" "Azalea," I answered, voice cracking. She repeated it softly, like she was tasting something precious. "Thank you, Azalea." Then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my freezing hands in hers, squeezed once, and held my gaze for a long time. No words, just understanding passing between two strangers who suddenly weren't strangers anymore. After what felt like forever, she let go, stood up with a new steadiness, and gave me the smallest smile. She walked away, swallowed slowly by the night before I could even think to call her back. I sat back down alone, colder than I had ever been in my life, teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. But for the first time since the door shut, the pain in my chest felt different. Lighter, like giving away the last thing I had somehow gave me back something I didn't know I was missing. The motel room smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap pine cleaner. I had been staring at the same Indeed page for hours, applying to anything that paid above minimum wage, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Azalea Vance?" The woman's voice was crisp, professional, with a slight East Coast clip. "I'm Claudia O'Neill, calling on behalf of Madame Eudora St. Clair. She would like to meet with you immediately." I laughed out loud. I literally laughed because it sounded like a prank. "Who is this, really?" The line stayed silent for 2 seconds. "Madame St. Clair will explain everything. A car is waiting outside room 112. I looked through the peephole. 19 identical black BMW 760s lined the cracked parking lot like a presidential motorcade. The back door of the lead car opened on its own. I grabbed my keys and walked out in the same jeans and hoodie I'd been wearing for 2 days. She was waiting in the middle car, the woman from the bench. Hair now in a flawless low bun, a camel hair coat cinched at the waist, red bottom heels catching the sun. She looked 78, going on timeless. "Azalea," she said softly, like we were old friends. The door shut with a soft thud. The partition rose. We pulled away. 20 minutes later, the gates opened to a 1920s Tudor-style mansion on a quiet cul-de-sac in Atherton, hidden behind redwoods and a 10-foot hedge. I had driven past this street 1,000 times and never knew it existed. The inside smelled like cedar and roses. A fire crackled in a stone hearth big enough to stand in. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a private lake. She motioned for me to sit on a cream sofa that probably cost more than my car. A butler poured tea, neither of us touched. "My full name is Eudora St. Clair," she began. "My late husband founded St. Clair Commercial Realty. When he passed 12 years ago, I took the company private and poured the profits into the St. Clair Family Foundation. We own or finance over 400 million square feet of office and retail space across the country. The foundation deploys roughly $120 million a year." I just stared. My brain couldn't compute the numbers. She leaned forward. "Every Christmas Eve for the past 25 years, I do the same thing. I leave the estate dressed as someone who has nothing. No visible security, no purse, no phone. I walk until I find someone who still has a heart when they think no one is watching. Most years I walk all night and come home disappointed. This year, I found you." She explained that after I walked away, her security team, dressed in plain clothes and stationed 2 blocks away, had watched me from a distance for 48 hours. They saw me check into the motel with cash, eat vending machine food, apply to 50 jobs in one sitting, cry in the shower, and never once try to find out who the homeless woman was or brag about the good deed. "You are the first person in 15 years," she said quietly, who gave away the last thing keeping them alive without expecting a single thing in return. I needed to know if that was a fluke or if that is who you really are. She stood up and walked to the window, hands clasped behind her back. I have no children. I have no heirs. When I go, strangers on a board will decide where my money goes. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be discarded on Christmas Eve to decide how we help the next person who gets thrown away. She turned to face me. I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If at the end of it, you are the person I think you are, the foundation will be yours to run, not a gift, a responsibility. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why? Was all I could say. Because, she said, eyes suddenly fierce. I know exactly what it feels like to sit on a frozen bench with nowhere to go and still choose kindness. I was 29 when my own father did that to me. I promised myself if I ever had the chance, I'd make sure no one who chose right in that moment stayed lost. She extended her hand. So, Azalea Vance, will you come home with me? I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new bedroom was bigger than my parents' entire downstairs, with French doors opening to a rose garden I could actually smell from the bed. Claudia O'Neill, tall, silver-haired, no-nonsense, handed me a leather binder the thickness of a phone book and said, "Welcome to boot camp." The first month was brutal. 6 a.m. runs around the lake with Eudora's ex-Navy trainer. Working breakfasts at 7:30, where I learned to read a 990 PF tax return faster than most CPAs. From 9 to 6, sitting next to Eudora in board meetings at the Foundation's offices on Sand Hill Road, taking notes while billionaires argued about impact metrics. Evenings were spent dissecting 20 years of grant files until my eyes burned. Eudora didn't want another rich girl playing philanthropist. She wanted someone who could turn dollars into changed lives without wasting a dime. Her favorite phrase became, "We don't give fish. We don't even give fishing lessons. We buy the damn river and make sure everyone can eat forever." She enrolled me in the executive program for nonprofit leaders at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. Full tuition covered, no questions asked. 3 nights a week, I drove the 5 miles to campus, sat in classrooms with executives twice my age, and learned to measure outcomes instead of intentions. Weekends meant site visits, shelters for battered women in East Oakland, after-school programs in East San Jose, housing projects for veterans in the Central Valley. I interviewed mothers who had escaped abuse with just their kids and a trash bag of clothes. I listened to teenagers explain how a safe place to do homework kept them out of gangs. Every story etched itself into me. Back at the estate, Claudia drilled me on governance, how to handle a rogue board member, how to say no to a senator's pet project without losing federal matching funds, how to fire a grantee caught embezzling without triggering a PR nightmare. I rewrote the entire grant application process from scratch. Shorter forms, faster decisions, mandatory site visits within 30 days of approval. Eudora read every draft and bled red ink all over them. Then she made me defend every single change in front of the full board. There were nights I fell asleep on the kitchen island with my face on a spreadsheet. There were mornings I cried in the shower because I felt like an imposter who would never be good enough. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered sitting on that frozen bench with nothing, and I kept going. June arrived, warm and sudden. One Thursday morning, Eudora texted me. Library. I walked in expecting another 12-hour strategy session. Instead, she was alone, sunlight filtering through the stained glass, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She slid the folder across the mahogany table and remained standing. Inside was an employment agreement on thick cream paper. Title: President and CEO, St. Clair Family Foundation. Reporting line, directly to the board, meaning her until she decided otherwise. Base salary, $195,000. Equity, 3%, stake in the foundation's endowment, currently valued at just under $4 billion. Authority, full decision-making power over all programs starting year 3, subject only to fiduciary duty. I looked up, speechless. She finally sat down, folding her hands like she was praying. "I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat," she said. "Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes when a camera might be watching. I watched you for 5 months straight. I saw you fight for a domestic violence shelter that every banker in the room wanted to defund because the numbers looked messy. I saw you sit on a folding chair in Oakland until midnight listening to a 17-year-old girl explain why she couldn't go home. I saw you rewrite a 70-page policy manual because one paragraph would have left transgender kids without a bed." Her voice cracked, just once. "You have the mind I need, Azalea, and you have the heart I lost a long time ago. The foundation is yours to steer. I'll stay on the board to keep the old guard in check, but day to day, the river belongs to you now." I tried to say thank you, but nothing came out. She waved it off. "Sign it before I change my mind and make you finish the endowment tax module first." I laughed through tears and signed. That night, we opened a 1982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace. Just the two of us, watching the sun dip behind the redwoods. She raised her glass. "To the girl who had every reason to turn bitter and chose kindness anyway." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to the woman who refused to let a good deed stay invisible." We drank. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. October smelled like wet leaves and money in San Francisco. I was in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 2000 California Street, reviewing the final numbers for the second home campus, when Claudia buzzed once and opened the door. "Your sister and Darius Whitaker are downstairs. No appointment." I felt my stomach drop the way it used to when Vivica borrowed my clothes in high school and brought them back ruined. "Tell security to send them up." They walked in looking like they had rehearsed the performance in the elevator ride. Vivica was wearing a modest navy sheath dress instead of her usual bodycon, hair in a low ponytail, minimal jewelry. Darius had swapped the hoodie and sneakers uniform for a navy suit that almost fit well. Both wore the tight smiles of people who practiced apologies in the mirror. Vivica spoke first, voice soft, eyes shimmering. "Azalea, I've been horrible. We've been horrible. I am so sorry for everything. Christmas Eve, the things I posted. Everything." Darius nodded vigorously. "We're getting married next spring, trying to do things the right way." I stood behind my desk, hands clasped, and waited. Vivica took a breath. "Daddy's in trouble. Some investments went south. He and Mama might lose the house. And Darius's new company, AI for Elder Care, just needs $2 million to close the seed round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death." I raised an eyebrow. "Which part is life or death? Dad's mortgage or his valuation?" Darius forced a laugh. "Look, I get it. You're big time now. But blood is blood, right? $2 million is nothing to the foundation." I leaned back. "Tell me what happened to the $38 million trust fund you took last December." Vivica's mask flickered. "We diversified, crypto, NFTs, some angel deals Darius's friends were running. It was supposed to 10x, then FTX crashed. Luna went to 0. Most of it is gone." Darius chimed in. "Market downturn. Happens to everyone. Sequoia lost billions too. We just need a bridge." I opened the folder Claudia had silently placed on my desk. Screenshots, bank records, and a Forbes article titled, "The Vance Family Bets Inheritance on Meme Coins." I spun the folder so they could see. 87% gone in 11 months, I said calmly. "You bought a Lambo each, put a deposit on a condo in Miami, and paid influencers to pump coins. That's not a downturn, Darius. That's arson." Vivica's mask slipped. "Seriously? You're going to sit there in your fancy office and let Mama and Daddy go homeless?" I hit the intercom. "Security to 22, please." Darius tried sweet reason. "Come on, Azalea. $2 million is chump change here. You won't even miss it." The door opened. 2 guards in suits stepped in. I stood up. This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net, not for people who set theirs on fire and now want mine. You aren't getting a dime. Not today, not ever. Vivica went scarlet. You ungrateful! She was already pulling out her phone, recording, as the guards took her elbow. By the time they reached the lobby, 3 paparazzi vans and a local gossip blogger were waiting outside the glass doors. Someone had tipped them off. Vivica put on a full performance. Tears, trembling lip, screaming about the cold-hearted sister abandoning her own blood. The video hit TikTok in 20 minutes. Caption: My billionaire sister won't even help our parents keep their home. Family first. #toxic sister. It blew up. 10 million views in 6 hours. Then the internet did what it does best. Former classmates posted yearbook photos of Vivica pouring yogurt into my backpack senior year. Someone found the Christmas Eve Instagram Live where she laughed while I dragged my suitcase out. A former nanny went on record about the way Vivica used to lock me out of the house in the rain as a prank. The comments flipped from sympathy to pitchforks. Vance Family Exposed trended higher than the original video. Darius's pitch deck for the seed round leaked. Someone at the foundation accidentally forwarded it to a reporter. Turns out, the AI for elder care startup was 90% smoke and 10% his cousin's garage project. Investors vanished. Vivica's wedding planner canceled. She hadn't paid the deposit. Her engagement announcement post was dragged in the comments into oblivion. I never posted a single word. By midnight, the video was age-restricted for harassment. The blogger issued a groveling apology, and Vivica's follower count had been cut in half. Claudia poured me a glass of scotch when I got back to Atherton that night. Poetic justice tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger, she said. I raised the glass to the dark window. It tastes like closure. November brought a cold fog that never quite lifted. The news broke on a Tuesday. Pacific Crest Capital collapses. $4.2 billion Ponzi scheme unraveled. Dad had moved every remaining dollar, mortgage refinance, HELOC, even Mama's jewelry, into the fund 6 months ago because the guaranteed 18% annual return was going to get them back on track. The FBI raided the offices in Newport Beach the same week. The founder was already on a yacht somewhere in Cabo. 30 days later, the foreclosure notice was taped to the front door of the Hillsborough mansion. No bidders showed up at the auction. The bank took possession. Langston, Ophelia, and Vivica moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon on Story Road in East San Jose. Rent, $1,900 a month. It was all they could afford. After filing for bankruptcy, Vivica's credit cards were maxed out at $247,000, mostly on handbags and coping shopping sprees. After the October disaster, collection agencies were calling nonstop. They showed up at the foundation without an appointment on a rainy Thursday morning. Security called up. I told them to let all 3 in. Dad looked 20 years older. Hair completely white, shoulders hunched, wearing a sport coat 2 sizes too big. Mama had cut her hair and dyed it a cheap drugstore brown that didn't quite match. Vivica wore no makeup, eyes puffy, clutching a knockoff purse like a life raft. I met them in the small glass conference room on the 22nd floor. No water, no coffee. Claudia stood outside the door. Dad spoke first, voice cracking on every word. Azalea, you're my daughter. I know we hurt you. I know we don't deserve anything. But we have nowhere else to turn. The lease on the apartment is up in 6 weeks. We're going to be on the street. Mama stared at the table, twisting a handkerchief into shreds. Vivica finally looked up, eyes red. Please, just enough for a fresh start. We'll sign whatever. We'll never ask again. I opened a slim black folder and placed 3 business cards on the polished wood. First card, Marcus Chen, Certified Financial Planner specializing in post-bankruptcy recovery. Second card, a debt management and financial literacy program. Free 8-week course funded by the foundation, held at the East San Jose Community Center. Third card, California Crisis Line for NAMI. National Alliance on Mental Illness, and a local therapist who accepted sliding scale fees. I pushed the cards toward them. This is what the St. Clair Foundation can do for strangers who lost everything through no fault of their own, I said, voice neutral. It is the exact same help we offer anyone who walks in here broken and scared. Dad's hand shook as he reached for the cards. Then he stopped halfway. That's it? After 32 years, that's all you have for your own father? I stood up. You had options, Langston. You chose to rewrite the trust. You chose to chase returns that looked too good to be true. You chose to stay silent when Vivica humiliated me for sport. Those were your choices, not mine. Mama finally looked at me. Tears were streaming down her face. We were wrong. We are so sorry. I looked her in the eye for the first time in almost 2 years. I believe you're sorry now, I said. But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does. Courage does. Taking responsibility does. Vivica started sobbing, loud and messy. You're enjoying this. You want us to suffer. I walked to the door and held it open. No, I answered. I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore. Security escorted them out. Dad never looked back. Mama whispered, I'm sorry, one last time as the elevator doors closed. Vivica kept crying until they hit the lobby. Claudia offered me a tissue I didn't realize I needed. They'll be all right, she said quietly. People who hit rock bottom either stay there or start climbing. You gave them the only ladder we're allowed to give. I nodded, watching the rain streak the windows. For the first time, the ache in my chest was gone. Not replaced by joy, just space. Space to breathe. The sky over East Palo Alto was the color of steel on opening day. Second home stood like a promise kept. 4 stories of glass and redwood wrapped around a courtyard where kids were already chasing each other between planters filled with rosemary and kale. 3,000 people packed the plaza, families who would live there, donors, city council members, every major news network, even the governor cutting the ribbon. I stood backstage in a simple black suit, heart beating louder than the brass band warming up. Claudia squeezed my hand once. Eudora, elegant in winter white, gave me the smallest nod from the front row. This was the project I had bled for. 200 units of permanent supportive housing, on-site medical clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop farm, and a policy that no one would be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared as my name was called. I walked to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document I had ever signed. I looked out at the sea of faces. Near the back, almost hidden behind a pillar, stood Langston, Ophelia, and Vivica. Dad was wearing an old navy peacoat that hung loose. Mama was clutching a paper coffee cup like it might disappear. Vivica had cut her hair short and looked strangely small without the armor of designer labels. I let the silence settle for 3 full seconds. 1 year ago tonight, I began, voice steady, I was kicked out of the only home I had ever known with 1 suitcase and nowhere to go. I learned that night what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A ripple moved through the crowd, cameras zoomed in. I also learned something else on a frozen park bench. True family isn't DNA. True family is the stranger who chooses to see you when you are invisible. True family is the hand that reaches out when you have nothing left to give in return. I turned and gestured to the building behind me. This is second home. 200 families will never again have to sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the back seat because the lights got cut off. And every single person who walks through these doors will be told the same thing I needed to hear that Christmas Eve. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. The applause started slow, then exploded. People stood up. Phones went up like a wave of light. I waited for it to crest, then spoke again, softer. So every microphone had to strain to catch it. Tonight, we open these doors for every person who has ever been told they don't belong, especially for those who were told that by the people who were supposed to love them the most. I looked straight across the plaza at the three figures in the back. Dad's shoulders shook. Mama covered her mouth. Vivica looked at the ground. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just held their gaze for a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. Then I stepped away from the podium. The governor cut the ribbon. The band struck up. Kids rushed forward with flowers. Reporters shouted questions I pretended not to hear. I walked down the steps, through the crowd that parted like water, and headed toward the main entrance. Langston tried to step forward. "Azalea." I kept walking. Not fast, not slow. Just forward. Mama reached out a hand that never touched me. Vivica opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time in her life, said nothing at all. I passed 2 feet from them without breaking stride. The massive redwood doors of Second Home slid open automatically at my approach. Warm light spilled out onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. The doors slid shut behind me with a soft, final sound. I never looked back. Not because I hated them, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I finally understood that forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you. Sometimes it just means walking through a new one and letting the old one stay closed. Inside, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged on my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" he asked. I knelt down so we were eye level. "I'm one of them," I said. He offered me a dandelion he'd picked from the courtyard. "For you. Why did you give us a home?" I took the flower, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled like I meant it. Outside, the celebration went on. Inside Second Home, the future began. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.